We'll call the meeting to order since it's 7 p.m. And if you're available, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, Madam Clerk, I'll let you call roll, please.
Mayor Pape,
Here.
Councilmember Shavetta. Here. Councilmember Hands.
Here.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Here.
Councilmember Leahy.
Here.
Councilmember Neal.
Here.
Councilmember Ryder.
Here.
Councilmember Silvers.
Here.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Here.
I guess I'm up. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, the next item on our agenda is the public items. We did have a sign-up sheet, but no one has signed up. That does not preclude you from still coming forward. But members of the public are encouraged to use this time to make comments about matters that do not appear on the agenda. Comments about items on the regular agenda will be taken up as each item is considered. Please note that individuals making comments must be limited to 5 minutes. Okay, is there anyone out there wishing to come forward at this time with any other business that is not on the agenda? Okay, boy, they're flocking forward now. Okay. Well, at that point, we will close out those items for public items. Okay, the next item is the consent agenda. All items under the heading are considered to be routine by the City Council and may be enacted by one motion. There'll be no other separate discussion of these items unless the council members so request. Considering we only have one item on the agenda, if anybody has any questions or concerns about that item before we ask for a motion. Anyone? Looks like I see nobody raising their hands about concerns, so I would entertain a motion. Mr. Silvers.
Mayor, I'd like to consider the approval of the June 13th, 2022 minutes.
Okay, we have a motion. We have a second. Ms. Hands.
I second that.
Okay, motion is second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, thank you, Madam Clerk. Okay, the next item on is the mayor's report, and I'm fortunate to get to read a proclamation for our Park and Recreation Month. And if you've looked around, we have several of our Park and Rec people in attendance. So actually, would those of you from Park and Rec, would you at least raise your hands so you can be acknowledged? This is your month. Okay, thank you. Thank you for attending. Okay. Well, this is all about you. Okay. Whereas parks and recreation programs are an integral part of the communities throughout the country, including Merriam, and whereas our parks and recreations are vitally important to establishing and maintaining the quality of life in our communities, ensuring the health of all citizens, and contributing to the economic and environmental well-being of a community and region, and whereas parks and recreation programs build healthy, active communities that aid in the prevention of chronic disease, provide therapeutic recreation services for those who are mentally or physically disabled, and also improve the mental and emotional health of all citizens. And whereas parks and recreation programs increase a community's economic prosperity through increased property values, expansion of the local tax base, increased tourism, the attraction and retention of businesses, and crime reduction. And whereas parks and recreation areas are fundamental to the environmental well-being of our community, and whereas park and natural recreation areas improve water quality, protect groundwater, prevent flooding, improve the quality of the air we breathe, provide vegetative buffers to development, and produce habitat for wildlife, and whereas our parks and natural recreation areas ensure the ecological beauty of our community and provide a place for children and adults to connect with nature and recreate outdoors, and whereas The U.S. House of Representatives has designated July as Parks and Recreation Month, and whereas the City of Merriam recognizes the benefits derived from parks and recreation resources, now therefore I, Bob Pape, by the virtue of the authority vested in me as Mayor of Merriam, Kansas, do hereby proclaim July 2022 as Park and Recreation Month in the City of Merriam. Proclaim this 27th day of June, 2022. Thank you, and thank you for all you Park and Rec people for everything you do for our community. We appreciate it. And I'm sure you want to stay for the rest of the meeting, but if you need to go, we understand. But
Can we get a picture with you and the staff?
awesome, that'd be great. Yeah, can we do that? I'll even bring the proclamation down. Good enough. Can we get an 8 by 10 glossy of that? Thank you, guys. Appreciate it.
Come visit us. July, come visit us, come see us.
Always exciting to have them with us. Well, moving right along, we are going to have a public hearing this evening. As was advertised, we're going to conduct a public hearing to consider the Shawnee Mission Parkway and Antioch Road redevelopment plan for Project Area M. And I'll turn that over to Director Dyer.
Good evening, Mayor, council members. Brian Dyer, Community Development Director, and let me get this presentation going here for you. There we go. This evening, as the mayor mentioned, we have scheduled a public hearing in regards to the Merriam Grand Station TIF project. First of all, I'd like to introduce a few people here this evening. Behind me, we have Matt Pennington and Scott Miller with Drake Development. Over here on the left, I have Joe Sharano with Kutek Rock City Bond Council for you this evening. But really this evening, as you all know, for big projects, complicated projects like this they're asking for a public-private partnership. Have a number of different items that go along with these types of projects, and we try to get those items to all end up at the city council all at the same time. Really, there's 4 major elements that go along with that. We have the TIF project plan. We have the redevelopment agreement, the RDA. We have the planning and zoning aspects of it, and then we also have the plat aspects of it. We try to get all those things here to you all at the same time so the council, the public, everybody can see the overall project, see what the public-private partnership part of that is. And so we try to make that one package for everybody to see. We think it makes it much more efficient, gives everybody a much better overview of what the project is. So this evening, however, we are still working on one of those projects, one of those documents, the redevelopment agreement. We're still negotiating that, still working on the final aspects of that. And we want to make sure we give everybody participating in this, staff, the development team, and particularly the city council, ample enough time to review that RDA. So with all that being said, when I get to these items, staff's going to recommend that these items either be continued or tabled to your July 11th meeting. So, however, we've already advertised per resolution that this is going to be the night of the public hearing for the TIF project plan. As part of state statutes, the city is required to make a presentation. So we're going to recommend that after I go through the project plan presentation, you all open the public hearing and then immediately continue that to July 11th. Also want to say that July 11th, you're going to hear me do this same speech again, plus a whole lot more. by the time we get done on July 11th, you'll be ready for me to sit down, and so will I when I get done with that presentation. So with that, I'm going to real quickly go into this. It looks like we may be having technical difficulties.
I am having technical difficulties,
that's all right.
but I can bring it up on this one, so just give
Okay.
me 1 second.
Yeah, thank you, Julie. And if not, that's all right. I think
No, we can get it.
we can make it through here without it this evening.
We're good.
That'll work. Thank you, Julie. So again, this evening we're the Merriam Grand Station redevelopment project. Next one there, Julie. So a little bit of history about stuff that have happened to date, just to get everybody kind of up to speed on the history of this project. Back on May 10th, the council approved, May 10th of 21, council approved a funding agreement with Drake Development to relate to the city's expenses related to the public incentive request. In June of last year, the council approved taking in what we call the Kmart properties into the TIF district. Then on the 13th of December of last year, we had a study session, kind of a Eco Devo 101 to talk about, with the city council, to talk about the different types of incentive packages that the city has available. And one of those was tax increment financing. Kind of fast forward, after that December meeting, there was a lot of discussions going on between the city and Drake Development. And then on April 25th of this year, Drake Development requested that a portion of the TIF district be removed because they were going to come forward with a request to do a tax abatement for those apartments areas. So the area that has to be removed were the residential areas, the apartment area. And I will point that out in just a second when we get to the TIF project plan. On May 4th, Planning Commission had a finding that the Cheyenne Mission Parkway and Antioch Road, southwest corner redevelopment project plan for Project Area M, that's the Kmart project, was consistent with the intent of the comprehensive plan for the development of the city. And that's, again, the part that is the first piece of this puzzle of these different documents, and that's also the part that the public hearing is supposed to be on. May 9th, council approved the resolution setting today as a public hearing to consider the project plan, hence the reason why we're doing this evening. May 10th, there was a joint city council planning commission work session with Drake Development to review the plan that they had submitted to the planning commission. That was a rezoning and preliminary development plan submittal. June 1st, planning commission conducted a public hearing on that rezoning and preliminary development plan. And they also acted on a plat that accompanies that. I do want to point out that at that public hearing, there were no public comments on the rezoning or development plan. So it kind of brings us up to tonight. And again, as I mentioned, we're going to do a presentation on the project plan. And then again, open the public hearing and continue to July 11th. And then also, we would suggest that you table the planning commission items to July 11th as well. And then again, as I mentioned earlier, on July 11th, I will make a full overview presentation of the entire project. So going right into the project plan. So this is the TIF project plan. If you remember, we have a TIF district. I'll show you the map here in just a second. The TIF district has the TIF district plan is kind of the 50,000 foot level view of things. It describes what redevelopment should happen within the district, but it doesn't get into specifics on that. However, the district plan does set out the different areas within the district that can be redeveloped. We are on project area M as in Mary. Project area N as in Nancy, that's to the Chipotle project. So this is the project plan for M. And the project plan gets a little bit more specific in regards to what kind of redevelopment could occur within that area. Again, it's not as specific as something like the preliminary development plan that the Planning Commission acted on and that you would be acting on this evening, but it is still a bit more specific than the TIF district. Again, this is the I-35 TIF district. Goes from 75th Street up to Johnson Drive, goes along I-35. The southern portion of it is on the west side of I-35. And then once it gets up to Cheyenne Mission Parkway, it jumps over to the east side. The area we're talking about this evening is Area M. As you can see up here, these are all the different project areas that are within our TIF district. Again, project area M is up here, kind of the middle right. It's the Kmart properties. I do want to point out, next slide shows a little bit better. This is the actual area as we zoomed into it. I do want to point out a couple of things as we look at this slide. This area here, this is within the TIF district, but it is not within the TIF project plan M, so we are not considering this as part of the project area. That is the Krispy Kreme and the Freddy's facilities. And then these areas here, these are the two areas that a couple of months ago, the council, at the request of Drake Development, removed from the TIF district. These are the areas that will have the 2 apartment buildings on it. Also want to point out as well that right down here on the corner, that is the location of La Petite Academy. They've never been considered to be part of the TIF district, but I do want to point that out. So again, as I mentioned, these are the 2 areas that, at the request of Drake Development, were removed from the TIF district. So what is the project plan? Project plan is TIF project plan. It's very straightforward. It really has a number of components, but probably the one that's most germane and important to the redevelopment of it is really the map, which you see up here this evening, to show the areas that are within the project plan and are areas to be considered for redevelopment, and also areas, again, to be considered for TIF disbursements if the council sees fit. Then the other major portion of the project plan is the verbiage or the text in it that describes what is appropriate for this area. So for Area M, this is right out of the project plan. Commercial development consisting of 2 to 7 buildings ranging in size from 1,500 to 2,000 square feet, and structures to provide for parking for the commercial and residential buildings and the necessary infrastructure in support of the project plan. So really, that is the project plan. Again, probably of all this redevelopment project, that is the most straightforward and simplest part of it. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any questions that the council may have at this time. Again, I will say that I'm going to do this exact same presentation on July 11th. But if you have any quick questions now, I'd be happy to answer them. Otherwise, again, as I mentioned, staff recommends you open the public hearing and then continue it to July 11th.
Do we have any questions for Director Dyer? How about Ms. Shavetta or Mr. Neal? Do you have any questions for Director Dyer?
No.
All right. Thank you. Let's
Just gonna
Move
stay
on.
here, Have you guys motion, because I got to do the next 2 as well.
Need
so-
to open them.
we're going to open the public hearing.
Yes.
Yep, just open it up.
We can do that. Okay, well, with that, we will open the public hearing concerning this subject matter. And as Director Dyer has indicated, we really are looking forward to and I think I see a motion here from Ms. Hands.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council continue the public hearing to July 11th, 2022 City Council meeting.
Okay, we have a motion. And Ms.
Mr.
Shadrich?
Mayor, second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay.
Just real briefly, the
Right.
next 2 items are planning commission items, and staff recommends that you table both of those items as well to keep them in line with the redevelopment agreement as well as the TIF project plan. Table those to July 11th.
Okay, I see Ms. Hands. I'd like to make a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council table this item, which is the approval of a request for rezoning, to the July 11th, 2022 City Council meeting.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, second.
Aldrich, thank you. I started to cough, I'm sorry. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodrich.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. And I think we have one more motion to make.
I
Ms.
do
Haynes.
have one more motion to make.
Okay,
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council table the dedication of easements item to the July 11th, 2022 City Council meeting.
okay, we have a motion. Do I have a second? Ms. Shadrick.
Mr. Mayor, I second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Madam Clerk.
Councilmember Leahy.
Aye.
Councilmember Neal.
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder.
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers.
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge.
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta.
Aye.
Councilmember Hands.
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell.
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Okay, well, with that, I think I can close out the public. As we had indicated, this is all going to be done again on the next meeting, so.
We're not closing out the public
No,
hearing.
we're not closing out the public hearing, excuse me.
Not closing out the public hearing.
You continue, I mean, not, it continued it, not, well, there you go. So I guess I don't technically close out the public meeting, since we are continuing it to the 11th, I believe, July 11th. And at that point, we will accept public comments then. All right. So, having that continued, we're ready to move on, I suppose, to council items. And it looks like consider approval of a ground lease agreement with MW Towers LLC. And Bingo looks like it's going to take that one on.
I am. Thank you, Mayor, Council. Next item on your agenda is consider approval of a ground lease agreement with MW Towers LLC for telecommunications tower at 6901 Knox, which is the Public Works facility. In late 2021, as background, late 2021, the city received a call from MW Towers seeking a location somewhere in the neighborhood of 67th and I-35 for a monopole, 130-foot monopole for telecommunication services. They were looking in several locations. Public Works, city attorney, myself, had some conversations about what made sense, where we would want it, knowing that there were two things that we tried to keep in our mind when we were thinking about what made sense for the location of a cell tower. One is that cell service is really almost a utility. It's a need these days. I mean, there are folks that are that are houseless, that have cell phones. It's how they connect with services. We all want improved cell service, and as a first being like it's a utility, it's a need, we wanted to approach it from such. The second approach that we wanted to make sure that we're mindful of is that, well, probably everyone would appreciate increased cell service. No one wants a cell tower in their neighborhood or in their backyard. And one of the locations that I think was being thrown around was somewhere down on West Frontage, which is a very visible location. We've got businesses that are down there. So as we kind of thought about where it would make some sense, Public Works was an option that we talked to with MW Towers, and became quite very quickly the prime place for it. It is out of the way. It's in what we would consider to be the old tree farm that we have in the southern portion of that property that we don't use anymore. So as we work through that, we have had several different iterations of the agreement, all of them being very similar, to work out the terms of the lease. It's a land lease. I've got some details in here that I'll cover, but unlike a cell tower in a residential area or on private property, this does not require a special use permit. It is just a lease that is awarded per approval of the City Council. So some of the things that would be would be involved in a normal cell tower process are not required by this process unless the council so chooses. I'm sure the applicant would be willing to answer questions, and they have some answers to some questions that we anticipate may be asked. But I want to just kind of cover some of the lease details. They're looking for a 70 by 50 tract of land. To include, it'll be a monopole. Difference between a monopole and like a lattice tower is lattice is kind of self-supporting. So when you think about the tower that's across the street, it doesn't have guide wires on it. It supports its own weight, but it's wider at the base, kind of narrows as it goes up. A monopole is exactly that. It's one size from the base to the top for the most part, and it's got guide lines that actually hold it up. They'll be responsible for restoring any property damage during construction. They're going to be replacing some trees that we'll be having removed. That was something that we asked them to do that they agreed to. They need 24/7 access to the site. That is a controlled access site. We've got a gate at Public Works, so we will give them their own individual code for that because we change those codes and rotate them from time to time. But that's something we can track. We would know when they had access to that site. Again, they won't have access to the building. They would just have access to the site. The agreement does require special inspection that says that it can hold up to certain weight loads. Once they put all of that stuff on there, we clearly, collectively want that tower, if it goes up, and council approves it, to stay up until it is brought down intentionally. The initial term is 5 years with 9 additional 5-year terms for a total of at a maximum 50 years. It's $750 a month lease rate for $9,000 a year. Each renewal will go up by 10%. The applicant is allowed to sublease and co-locate other facilities. I think from our standpoint, at least from the staff standpoint, the ability to co-locate on there, anything that we can put on that tower takes the need for small cell or other towers somewhere else in our community onto that side as opposed to on perhaps a residential street, some parkland, or some heavily commercial area. Clearly, the carriers want to be close to I-35, Shawnee Mission Parkway. You got a lot of traffic there, so anywhere we can kind of go in that area to help accommodate them, I think is a good thing for our residents and folks that use cell, which is everybody these days. Terms of the lease stay with the land, whether they sublease it or they lease spaces on that tower, so the terms of this agreement will run with the land. They have to maintain some liability insurance, $1 million per occurrence, 2,000 in aggregate, which is pretty much standard. And upon termination, they have to remove all the equipment to up to 3 foot below grade, so they would have to come clean all of their equipment out. And there's provisions in there for when that would occur and how quickly they have to do that. Again, as I mentioned, the city attorney, myself, Public Works, Community Development Director have talked about this and looked at the agreement. Happy to answer any questions. The applicant is here. I'll turn it over to him, let him answer any questions you may have specifically about his tower. Unless you have something about the agreement, the lease agreement, I will turn it over to him.
Mr. Silvers, did you have a question for Mr. Engel?
Yeah, I have 2 quick questions. I think you answered the first one already because you said it's not exactly in line with a typical utility agreement. Is there a franchise fee that's going to be charged for this tower, or?
That's what the lease is. That's what we're charging a lease because it's not in the right of way. It's actually on city property.
Okay. And then you said that they could possibly sublease this out. If they do, who is the entity that has access to it, including the code to get in?
That'd be a question I'm going to defer to the applicant. Yeah,
So-
I don't know who they hand that off.
So if there's would there be multiple companies that could sublease space on this pole so multiple people could have that code?
I would say that's possible, but I would defer to the applicant.
Thank you.
To answer that.
Okay, good. Ms. Hines?
And then I do have a couple of questions. So we're replacing the trees. Surely we're not planting them really close to the
No,
tower.
we'll probably put them in a park or something. We've said that, hey, if you want to plant them, you can plant them, or we can just plant 15 trees and send you a bill and say, hey, you owe us for 15 trees. We're not probably going to plant them right back there.
I didn't
where
think so.
there's- yeah.
Okay, thank you. And then the other one was, are we close enough that BNSF, the railroad, needs to be consulted or informed or anything?
The railroad, as far as I can tell, it doesn't look like that. The railroad is outside of what we consider the fall zone of that tower.
Right.
So, again, I would defer to the applicant, but I don't believe that they're not. again,
Fall zone and then any signal interferences was my curiosity.
Well, we've got 2
Others.
towers that are right there across from Chat Lane that are right on top of the train tracks also, and they're
Okay.
taller and actually more powerful towers.
Okay,
But
thanks.
we can look into that to make sure.
Thank-
Yeah, okay.
I had
Mr. Leahy,
one
go
question
ahead.
for you, Chris.
Yeah.
Do we think 2% rent increase per year is in line with typical agreements?
It's
10% over 5, I went ahead and divided.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, rates are all over. There is not a standard that I could find, to be quite honest with you. There are some people that are very proud of their property and view it as an opportunity to make money from providers. There's other ones that trade it for material, like, hey, we want cell phones or things like that with if it's directly with the carrier. So we felt like this was fair. That's up to council, though. It is city property. It's underutilized city property that we're not doing anything else with. But yeah, if I feel comfortable with that.
Okay, that's what I was curious. Looking ahead to the 8th or 9th renewal,
Yeah, sure.
Any other questions for Mr. Engel? Okay.
Bring up the applicant and
Yeah.
see if you have any
If
questions
our
for
applicant
him.
come forward and please give your name and your address, list your business for the record.
Mayor Pape, council members, my name is Paul Rablica with MW Towers. Last name is spelled Wrablica, just so it's out there. My office address is 3864 West 75th Street in Prairie Village. And here to answer questions. I think there are a couple I can still address. And then I had a brief presentation just to show you some aerial views from where the tower is going to be and to give you an idea of the line of sight, what was going to be visible above the tree line, and a few pictures of a monopole, a self-support, and the newly coming out these days small cells, which I'm sure you've seen around town.
Does anyone have any current questions? Would you like to hear the presentation and then take the questions? Yeah, I think, yeah, if we could do the presentation first, and then there may be a few questions raised.
Am I clicking?
I will be clicking, sorry.
We can just jump right into it. The first picture is a monopole. That's a 150-foot monopole. What we're proposing is 30 foot shorter. 130 foot, so 20 foot shorter. We could go on to the next one. This is the sight line from, I took a drone and went up to 80 feet, which is about the tree line of what's existing in the area. So the top portion of the tower will be visible. Nothing at the base will be from any vantage point in this location. And I think that's part of the appeal that Chris and I both agreed on, that it's not going to have significant impact other than the top of the tower providing signal that people want. South, east, north, and the west. And even from that area, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see, that's really the only view line that has houses to the west, and I couldn't see any. I think it'll be pretty well screened. If we could go back one picture. These are towers that are around town, and that just shows you different carrier configurations. We are working with a specific carrier that'll be the initial installer, but that shows you T-Mobile on the left-hand side, Dish, which is a new carrier on the bottom, AT&T, Verizon. So it gives you an idea of what the technology they're all putting out now. There's more and more antennas and more equipment going on the actual platform. And then the last picture, I believe, that's a small cell, which they're filling in all over the place, but they're still using the macro site for the majority of the coverage. And then the last picture just gives you an idea of a self-support tower, which I don't think anybody wants. And I'm
That's it?
ready for questions.
All right, someone have any questions? Mr. Leahy, go ahead.
how far down from the top of the tower do you foresee typically going by the time? I mean, I'm not asking for, just in general, I'm okay with more service, but is it the top 5 feet of the tower? Would it be the top 10 or 20?
The first carrier will be at 125-foot center line, and then I go every 15 foot down.
Okay.
And it'll be designed for 4 carriers, but that'll give it additional rigidity and capacity because as we've evolved in this business, the loading on these towers is excessive.
Yeah, I think, go ahead, Jason. I was going to add on to the sublease question. Would you sublease the whole tower itself or sublease to separate carriers?
We just sign license or lease agreements with the carrier. So in terms of access, if we have a code for access, I don't know if it's possible that we have, each carrier would have a code so that would identify who's using the compound or the facility during non-working hours.
Right.
Mr. Silvers?
My question.
Oh, that was it, okay. Are there any other questions? Look this way.
I do have one more.
Oh, okay.
I'm concerned about only removing equipment to 3 feet below grade. I'd really like to make sure that all foundations are removed as well. Those are pretty unfortunate for the person who finds them in the future.
Well, you're talking about the shaft of the monopole?
Yeah, just the line about termination of the lease, leasing will remove all equipment, and I'm just curious what constitutes equipment, because I imagine the monopole itself is equipment, but is the concrete foundation also going to be removed?
So the monopole foundation will be about a 6-foot diameter shaft. That will be removed down to 3 foot. Everything else at the site, equipment buildings, equipment cabinets, fencing, the posts for the fence, that will all be removed. So the only thing remaining will be the bottom portion of the monopole foundation. We haven't done a geotech. I don't know how deep that's going to go, but
I don't like finding concrete foundations in the middle of pad sites when I have projects that go up for construction, so I'm concerned about leaving concrete in the ground for the next person. I guess I'd like to see it amended to have all the foundations removed.
Okay. That's, Mr. Neal or Mr. Vetta, do you have any questions for the applicant?
I don't think so.
Okay. Thank you. Would you like to address that, Mr. Engel, or first?
We can certainly negotiate that, and unless he's willing to agree to it right now, we can approve it tonight. If not, he might have to go back and.
I'd rather have a foundation design done, because that can be, removing concrete down to 40 feet can be pretty expensive, and that would cost more than what we're putting into building the steel and everything else.
Okay.
And given where the site is, next to the railroad tracks with a creek on the other side,
It's going to be rocky.
I guess I'm looking at Director McDonald to see if he has any concerns about this 3 feet being below grade on the removal.
I currently do not, because that area there is fill, so there is concrete in there. So you're gonna run a lot of stuff. Yeah, I'm not.
we're going to find goodies.
Yes, you will.
I think that's important for Director McDonald to weigh in on that then. Okay. All right. Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Seeing none, I guess we'll dismiss you at this time.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Mr. Engel?
Happy to answer any other questions from a staff perspective, or,
Anybody have any questions for Mr. Engel? Seeing no other questions, I would entertain a motion. Ms. Hans?
Mr. Mayor, I move that the council approve a ground lease agreement with MW Towers LLC.
Okay, we have a motion, we have a second. Okay, Ms. Yandridge.
Mr. Mayor, I second.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Madam Clerk?
Councilmember Neal?
Aye.
Councilmember Ryder?
Aye.
Councilmember Silvers?
Aye.
Councilmember Yodridge?
Aye.
Councilmember Shavetta?
Aye.
Councilmember Hands?
Aye.
Councilmember Caldwell?
Aye.
Councilmember Leahy?
Aye.
Motion passes 8-0.
Thank you, Madam Clerk.
thank you, Mayor.
Mr. Engel. Okay, it looks like our next item for business is a review of the 2022 and 2023 revenue projections.
I will be running it from over here, Donna.
Will be-
Sorry, my lectern
Okay.
isn't working for some reason. Whoops.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, there we go.
Okay. Tonight, I want to share with you the projections and assumptions that I'm making for or that staff is making for the 2023 budget. To begin with, what revenues are we talking about? This really is a good depiction of our revenues in the general fund, which is our primary fund. If you look at all of the red, that's our sales tax, and that's 59% of our general fund revenue. And so that is a sizable amount of our revenue comes from that source. And 38% alone of it is from automobile sales, just to demonstrate that we were really very locked into that industry. And while that has certainly been a blessing to the city, that's also somewhat of a threat. If automobile sales go down, that could impact us quite a bit. The blue is our residential and commercial property tax, which makes up 24% of our general fund revenue. Franchise fees, 6%, and then fines, user fees, miscellaneous, all of that is about 11%. Go ahead. Looking at sales tax alone, we can see between 2019 and 20, we had a little bit of a decrease. Really, considering it was the pandemic year, I think we were very pleasantly surprised that it didn't go down more than it did. So just a slight dip. And then, as we talked all last year in 21, we really had this unbelievable increase in sales tax that put us up at 17.3 million. You'll see for 2022 right now, staff is estimating a slight decrease. We've not actually experienced a decrease to this point. However, I'm trying to be conservative, and you'll see even a little more of a decrease also in 23. I feel that there are a lot of little threats out there that we at least have to pay attention to. Recently, interest rates have gone up. How does that impact the financing of new cars? Does that slow anything down? We know that all industries, but in particular the automobile industry, is still having supply chain issues, and that really, right now, car sales are somewhat limited by the supply. And is that, what's going to happen with that? Inflation's certainly going nuts. And so just to be conservative and hedge our bets, I kind of ramped that down some. Another potential threat to sales tax that's kind of out there, we're not sure exactly how this will all shake out, is that the state legislature passed a law this year that said that delivery charges will no longer be in the calculation for sales tax, which at first I thought, okay, whatever, that doesn't sound like a big deal. But then whenever you ratchet that back, if you're talking about cars, that is a big deal, because a good amount of the money that you're spending on a car is for that. And so I did a calculation of, if that stands, what that would mean, and that's about $200,000 a year in sales tax that could potentially cost us. There was a lot of confusion on the way the bill was written as to what delivery charges are. Does it apply to automobiles? What does it apply? And so that was deferred until July of next year. And during this year, the Department of Revenue is going to work with the legislature to determine what that means. So we don't know. But if, in fact, that does mean cars, that's about a $200,000 hit. So that's kind of the thinking and where we put those sales tax numbers. So go ahead. We, on June 15th, received updated property tax assumptions from the county, and based on that, we would see right now in the budget, as we're going to present to you next time, we would see a property tax levy of $6.8 million. This would increase revenue by about $613,000 or 9.8%. We are forecasting no mill rate change, so it would stay at 27.665 mills. And the assessed valuation that they provided us was $247,609,000. And so we're going to dig into that a little deeper, but that's kind of the money shot, I guess. If we go on to the next one, this really shows the breakout in assessed valuation. Commercial has 51% or around 127 million. Residential, 114 million or 46%. And that other is like state assessed utilities, railroads, personal property, just a lot of other miscellaneous stuff. So the primary things that we think of are the commercial and residential. I know Councilmember Neal usually asks about how much of that is under the TIF, and so I thought, I'm going to be smart this time and just put it on the slide. And the assessed valuation of property in the I-35 TIF is just under 43 million. So of that 126 million, 43 million would be captured by the TIF. Okay. Okay, so we get to the revenue neutral rate that we've talked about several times, but just a reminder, it's the tax rate for the current year, or for the current budget year that we're looking at, for 23, that would generate the same amount of property tax revenue that we're going to collect in 22, basically. So, but it's a higher assessed valuation, so that rate has to come down to give you the same amount of revenue. It doesn't allow you anything for inflation or anything for new construction. It's just straight calculation. So whenever we do that, we see last year we had an assessed valuation of $225 million. The mill levy rate was 27.665. That generated $6.2 million. Using the new assessed valuation rate in order to generate $6.236 million, that mill has to be 25.188, or about a 2.5 mil reduction in order, if you want to keep it at that revenue neutral rate. Having said that, if you go to the next, I have here, again, we are proposing no reduction in the current mill rate. So we, as we're doing the budget, have made the assumption that there's not gonna, that we are gonna exceed the revenue neutral rate, and we're not gonna do any kind of rollback. And as Mr. Engel and I have talked, if that is a bad assumption and the city council is thinking that maybe we will roll it back or whatever, that's something that we probably need to know tonight or in the next day or two, because on the calendar you'll see next city council meeting, July 11th, we're going to present the draft budget, tell you what all of the expenditures are, and at that night you're going to have to give us a decision on whether or not you intend to exceed the rate. At that point, by July 20th, I'm going to notify the county what your decision is, and then in August, we'll have a hearing to decide if you do. Next time, 2 weeks from now, you're not going to actually set the mill rate. You're not even going to raise it. You're just saying whether or not you even want to consider raising it. And so that will be the decision that we'll be asking you.
If I could add to that, we will exceed the revenue neutral rate if we do not roll the mill back 2.5 mils. So if the council wants to roll back the mill 0.5 mil, wants to roll it back 1 mil, we will still exceed the revenue neutral rate. So just to kind of put that in a frame of thinking. So unless the council's desire is to roll back the mill 2.5 mils, we will be submitting a budget that exceeds the revenue neutral rate.
Yes, sir.
Is now the time for us to share our thoughts on what our expectation is?
Yes, I think this would be a great time.
What I would like to see is kind of back to the old school formula. What is new construction? What is a reasonable adjustment for inflation? And where does that land?
Okay.
And hopefully, it should land somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
My thoughts.
This is Councilmember Neal. I'd like to ask a question.
Go ahead, Mr. Neal. Go ahead.
Okay, I had a couple of questions as I always do. In the assessment that we just got, the new assessed value, do you know how much, first of all, what the increase in assessed value was, and then how that splits between residential and commercial? In other words, the percentage increase on the residential properties versus the commercial properties. Kind of several questions rolled into one.
Okay. The overall increase was 9.8%. The increase on the residential, and I am pulling this from my head, but it was between 11 and 12%. And the amount for commercial was, I believe, around 6%.
Okay, and what was the if you took out what was the total increase in revenue, assuming we keep the same mill rate, excluding the TIF district, and how much of that is residential versus commercial property?
Okay, could you ask that question again?
Okay, I like to sort of see there's three pots here. There's the residential property tax that goes into the general fund. There's the commercial property tax that goes into the general fund. And there's the commercial property tax that goes into the TIF, I-35 district. And I was trying to get a handle on the increase in tax if we keep the mill rate the same in each of those, in the general fund property tax, and then how that's split between the commercial and residential, and then in the TIF district, which is obviously restricted use within the TIF district. I'm just trying to get a handle on ultimately what the increased valuation means for our residents, and how much of the how much of an increase, proportionally they're going to be bearing versus the commercial property.
Okay, I do not have that right here in my back pocket, but we can certainly provide you the answers to all of that in the admin report on Friday. And we will also send the exact percentages that the assessed valuation increased for residential and commercial.
I appreciate that, and I'd love to see it broken out between the general fund and the I-35
I think we can do that.
district.
Okay.
Well, if that's possible.
Any other questions, Mr. Neal?
No, that was it for now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Ms. Shadrich?
Mine's more of a comment. So I understand us wanting to be conservative, but I also understand and feel as well that life is far more expensive now than it was even a couple years ago. And so if we opt to not roll back the mill and keep it the same as we have kept it for over a decade now, which is a feat, frankly, I would like to see the pot of cash in our grants that go back to citizens increase as well. Because there are citizens that we've heard of, Amy and I have heard from, who need to make home repairs and can't afford it, but the grant pool money's gone already. That giving back to our residents in a way that when they actually have like $10,000 expenses, that to me provides more value than giving back like, I don't know, $3 a month or whatever it comes to. When I'm not, don't quote me on that number. But, that's like half a coffee versus saying, here's more available to everyone when it really counts, when, you need to do something. Yes. Right. That's true. But also, some people can probably pay for a full coffee. So it's equal opportunity for everybody in the grant world as well. So to be conservative, I understand where we're coming from, but I would like to see a concerted effort to increase those pots of money for the residents, specifically the sustainability grant and the 20% exterior grant. Or anything else cool that I don't even know about yet that you're considering.
I do like that idea. Maybe we could raise some of the thresholds for reimbursement, or like the driveway grant, maybe we raise the threshold for eligibility. Rising tide, raising all ships.
Okay.
Good comments. I would also just remind people that we still have the dark store theory out there that hasn't completely been resolved, and we could lose funding for that, as well as the Turkey Creek moving forward, and then downtown, and what we might have to come up with, maybe more money there than what we currently have budgeted for. So as we go forward with trying to set that number to figure out, well, what the correct thing to do this year is, we have some pretty big unknowns out there. So, yeah.
I'm just going to tag on. I just think there's so much volatility in our expense side to damage what is there for the revenue side. It doesn't equate for me to do that. I don't want to reduce the mill.
Okay.
This council member Neil, when I get a chance, I've got a comment.
Sure, go ahead, Mr. Neal. You're up.
Yeah, as I have previously done, I am, and said in previous years, with the fairly significant increase in valuation that seems to be more impacting our residential stakeholders. I would like to see us consider reducing our mill rate a little bit. I think I recognize the fact that our mill is just a small piece of the property tax bill that people get. But in the last couple of years, we've had I've heard the argument a number of times. Well, really, unless these other taxing jurisdictions also reduce the mill rate a little bit, is really kind of pointless. But I think somewhere along the line, we've got to recognize that these increases in valuation increase people's taxes, and we have a number of residents who may or may not be able to afford those increases because it's coming out of a non-liquid asset that they have. They have to actually use their cash flow to pay the tax, in a sense, and they don't actually see the value until they sell the property, increase in value. And so it's sort of an insidious thing, and when it creeps up like that rapidly, and I mean, even just making a gesture to show that we recognize that and that we're trying to mitigate that to some extent, I think is warranted. I would like to know what the actual increase will be that the residents are likely to to see compared to the commercial property before I would recommend some sort of an amount to reduce the mill rate. But I also recognize that reducing it to a neutral rate is not practical, because again, they aren't accounting for new construction and some of the other things in that law that the legislature passed. So there's some flaws in there, but just philosophically, I think we ought to somehow address the increased burden that disproportionately affecting the residents recognize we also have a rebate program that's not widely probably known about, but and maybe we should do something else with that, something else with grant to sort of alleviate this. But I do think something across the board that recognize that we understand that the valuations are driving up the taxes, and also to encourage other jurisdictions to do something similar would be helpful. I'm done.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Director Oliver?
Okay.
All right.
So we've kind of covered this already, if you want to. With the budget as it stands right now, and we will take all of the comments that you had and go back and take those under consideration. I don't want you to think I didn't hear those, but we will. But with those, the 2023 budget would end us up with a general fund balance of about 7.4 million ending fund balance. And if we go ahead, and I'm sorry, could you go back just briefly? If you look at that, it looks like, oh, our fund balance is kind of beginning to tank because it's going down. But actually, we had a nice increase in it. And so now, really, this keeps us, go ahead, in our fund balance goal. So we're projecting that we may end 2022 quite a bit up above our goal, which our goal is 30 to 35%, and this puts us right back in alignment with it. And by the end of 2027, the end of the CIP plan, we would still be in that goal. So this is the 2023 budget. Again, next time we'll be going over everything in the budget and talking about revenue neutral rate again, so.
If I could just share a summary, make sure that I've got at least my head wrapped around what we need to be reporting back on. We want to take a look and see what the assessed valuation growth is for new construction versus just AV growth. Where inflation, is there an inflationary portion in that AV growth? I think this is Councilmember Caldwell's suggestion. We also want to take a look at the increase in the commercial by percentage versus the residential by percentage. I don't remember who to attribute that to, but that was something that we were going to look at. Per Councilmember Neal's request, the TIF versus the commercial versus the residential, kind of the three pots as he had suggested by percentage, increase in grant money. And I think Councilmember Neal shared that we do have a full property tax refund grant for folks that are in need. But I think Councilmember Leahy had suggested that maybe we need to change some of the barriers to entry on some of those grants, if possible, or play with some of those numbers, which we can definitely, we don't necessarily have to do as part of the budget process, but we can do as we come back in the fall to prepare the council for the grant updates that we do every year as we try to tweak them per council goal to make them more relevant for our residents. We can definitely have a conversation about that. So was there anything glaring that I missed out of all of that? But it did not sound, we will look at if it's possible to roll the mill back, but we are not building a budget that rolls the mill back, but we will bring in perhaps some conversation about if we wanted to, here's a couple ways we could do it if possible. Is that a pretty good summary?
This is Councilmember Neal. I wanted to, if it's possible, throw in there that I was, in addition to the percentage change, I was kind of curious as to what the actual amount of tax, the increment, of taxes generated between the two groups, the commercial and the residential, and the TIF, and the but not just percentage. I want to know how big of a revenue hit or increase we're looking at as well.
Yeah, we'll share percentages and dollars. We won't just give percentages in any of this. We'll actually give dollar figures.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director Oliver. Okay, let's see where we're, well, it looks like Director Dyer is heading here. I bet we're at community development update. We are. Okay.
Just real brief, as we talk about grants, the exterior grant program is going along well. We've allocated all those funds. We have an extensive waiting list for that. So if anybody ahead of them can't do their project, doesn't do their project, we should be in a good spot to make sure we get all those funds expended this year. The sustainability grant, just today, we allocated all the funds in there. We're still looking for folks who are planning on doing projects, because typically folks fall off, or they don't do their project, or they don't do as much as they intended to do. I was talking with Neighborhood Services Manager David Easley as to what may have caused suddenly a rash of sustainability projects coming in. The hot weather did it. Yes, people realized that they needed to upgrade their AC units. And yeah, so a lot of folks are out there getting new AC units and getting new HVAC and going for the high efficiency stuff. So that program has had a second wind, and looking like hopefully we'll get all that money expended.
Quick question. Relative to last year, when did we run out of money last year?
I'd have to look that up. It usually is about the same time frame. Last year was, again, another odd year because of the pandemic in regards to how those funds were expended. I will say for both programs, we usually come right up to the end of October, November to get them fully expended. Because like I said, folks don't do their project, late with their project, don't expend as much as they think on their project. So we usually go right up to the end of the year to get those expended. So the other thing I was going to mention, a couple other things I was going to mention, our rental licensing program is going well. We got our landlords all licensed per se, all the units for single family, duplexes and triplexes licensed. We also have been pretty successful in restarting doing interior inspections as well. If you recall, during the pandemic, we really backed off from that, but we've reinitiated that. That's going well, better than I expected. So that is good to get back in the flow of things, get back in the routine of things, so everybody understands how that program works. And then the last thing I have is Ross Dress for Less, the remodeling of the southern portion of Hen House. Hopefully, end of this week, first part of next month, they'll be doing a final inspection. We still don't have any kind of opening date or anything like that for them, but they are getting closer for the remodeling to be done. So I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Does anyone have any questions, Director Dyer?
I do.
Yes, Ms. Hands, go ahead.
So with the not getting to do the physical inspections for 2 years?
Yeah, well,
Did we
let's
see a
be clear-
big deterioration?
No, and when I say that, we still would do inspections if we got a tenant in there that wanted us to do inspections. So we still do that. Just real quick, we do, every 2 years, we try to inspect the interior of all the rental units except for the apartment complexes. We take a percentage of the apartment complexes, but for the most part, for all the units, every 2 years, we try to get in there. I would say in general, it's not been too bad, but there has been, and typically what it is interestingly enough, some of the most important things in there, folks taking switch and cover plates off, folks not putting batteries back in, or actually folks taking the batteries out of their smoke detectors to run the TV remote control, holes in walls and things like that. So we did see that, and then we also saw new landlords come in and not understanding what they needed to make their unit meet the requirements, particularly for life safety and things like that. So deterioration, yes, but that's why we thought it was very important to get back into the flow of things and get going again, to get folks again back used to us being in there and what we found. So that's why we were really, point of emphasis this year for us is to get back in there.
Just like to do a plug for that program. Not every city has a rental inspection program. I mean, the fact that we have that is a great asset to the residents that live in rental properties. Sometimes not necessarily to the landlords, but it is a great service for folks that sometimes don't feel empowered that there's anything they can do when they're renting a property from someone, and the fact that we have this program really helps give a little bit of backbone to their sometimes disagreements about what should be a standard of living in a rental unit. So it's a great program. It's a great asset.
Thank you, Mr. Engel. Okay. Are any other questions? Other questions? Okay.
Thank you, Mayor.
Director Dow. Okay, it looks like Director Oliver might be coming back to the podium. Monthly finance report.
Tonight, you should have found a copy of the popular report at your place. I think that, again, this is a great tool to really share financial information in a more understandable format. And so we certainly hope that you're able to use this as you're speaking to your constituents about the city's finances. We I believe I had shared with you that we issued the RFP to find a new financial accounting software. We received those back, and we received 5 bids. Our consultant, Soft Resources, right now is going through and comparing those and preparing a matrix, and staff is looking forward to, in the next week or two, beginning to review those with them and begin demos and hopefully be able to replace that. The finance report, just one interesting thing that you may find in there for this month. If you go to the very last page that's in that report, it's the investment listing by maturity date. And I can tell you that interest rates have gone up, and you can hear it on the news, but if you really want to see a visual, I guess, depiction of that, if you look at the purchase date and then you compare the interest rates, it's really kind of, a stark difference between, if you see something that we purchased, this time last year, it may say 0.07% interest, and if you look at something we just purchased, it's like 2.5%. And as I was looking at that yesterday at what was maturing, anyway, that just struck me as a real-life portrayal of what is going on in the economy. And certainly in this way, we benefit from it, in other ways we don't. So anyway, I don't have anything else tonight since I already spoke. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer those.
Any questions, Director Oliver?
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Other informational items, Mr. Engel, or staff?
I don't, other than to let the council know I will be out of town at the end of the week. My daughter is playing in volleyball nationals in Indianapolis, so we will be rooting her team on to win a national championship, we hope.
Okay.
But I'll be available by phone and check an email.
We appreciate that. Isn't the early registration for NLC going to be coming up?
June 30th, we
Pretty darn
have
quick.
so far we have 2, Councilmember Ryder, Councilmember Chivetta have both.
Could you add me to that list as well?
I sure can.
Thank you.
And me.
I will do that.
Ms. Hands, okay. Any other council people want to attend that? Save a few bucks if we let Mr. Engel know before the 30th, so. Okay.
I definitely want to see some of those mobile workshops. I mean, one of them is to tour the airport.
Awesome, okay.
I think that would be good. The new airport,
It's a great learning experience.
not
and
the old airport.
Yeah.
So it's 3 half circles, and you just
Yeah,
keep
no,
going.
not that one.
Okay, great.
Can,
Yes, Ms. Hand, do you have something?
are
else
you,
to
are
share?
you going to plug
The
this
Flags for
weekend?
Freedom?
Yes.
Or for Wednesday, or from what day?
Well, you can talk
I
about
think
Wednesday.
I'm okay. I think
Okay,
I'm
all
okay
right.
for Wednesday on, we're talking about Flags for Freedom and the marking of the fields and getting in preparation for it, but I'll let Ms. Hands talk about maybe volunteers
Well,
for setup.
we install on the 2nd at 7 o'clock in the morning.
Okay.
Come on down. And then we try to take them down at 10 o'clock the following Saturday, but the flags have to be dry. So often there's enough humidity that we kind of have to stand around and wait for the drying to happen. But the flags are out. I'm noticing Public Works has already been hard at work making them show up, so. Thank
at
you.
7 a.m. at the farmer's market for this Saturday. On the following Saturday, when we take down, it would be 10.
Right.
Okay. So,
10 a.m.?
10 a.m., yes, excuse me, 10 a.m.
Yes,
Yeah.
10 a.m.
Okay, anything else? I see nothing else. I would entertain a motion.
Mr. Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Okay, Ms. Yadrich has made a motion, we adjourn. Madam Clerk, oh, we need a second
Just
that.
Do we have a second?
We have a second for, wait, Amy, Ms. Ryder. We haven't heard from you tonight. Okay, I think Ms. Ryder is seconding.
Okay. All in favor to adjourn?
Aye.
All right.
Meeting's adjourned.